Hey, good afternoon. Kelly Barner, Scott Luton with you here on Supply Chain Now. Kelly, how you doing?
I am doing good, Scott. Thank you so much for everybody who has braved this very first episode. We just don't know what's going to happen over the next hour. Well, you do, but I don't.
Well, Kelly, I wish we had recorded our pre-show conversation. We had a good
Yes.
time speaking with our featured guest, which we're going to introduce here momentarily. But equally as exciting, this Dial P for Procurement has been a series in the works for a while. It's been really neat to collaborate with you and the Buyers Meeting Point community for so long, and then kind of reinvent that collaboration to really tackle one of the hottest topics in global business, right, Kelly?
Oh, absolutely. And especially right now, we're just at the start of a new year where, everybody else thinks about it as just supply chain, but there are some procurement specific considerations, things we've learned over the last year. The timing really couldn't be better for us to getting this show off the ground.
Excellent point. And that's the newest t-shirt idea. That's just
Ooh.
supply chain. That's just supply chain. I like that, Kelly.
Yeah.
Well, it's an exciting time to be in the profession of end-to-end global supply chain, and certainly in procurement. So look forward to that. So to our listeners, we're going to say hello to a few folks here momentarily. Dial P for Procurement is presented jointly by our friends at Buyers Meeting Point, as well as Supply Chain Now. And you can tune in every third Tuesday of the month throughout 2021 at 12 noon Eastern time. And Kelly, if you could, before we bring in our guests and before we say hello to a few folks, give us a couple bullet points of what folks can expect to hear about as part of this new series.
So I think if I had to think about two things that we're really going to be focusing on throughout the year, one is the fact that we're looking at procurement, of course, but in the context of supply chain. I think it's different when you say, okay, like you said, here's the other t-shirt idea. It's just procurement. Nobody wants to hear that. But when you think about procurement as a cousin of, a partner to, a subset of supply chain, however it happens to be in the conversation, you do tend to see it differently. And I think the other thing that we're going to focus on is that procurement has truly, over the last few years, become a craft, right? It's a practice we're putting a lot of investment into, a lot of education into. It is a far cry from the tactical buying processes of old. So we're really going to explore that, starting with our two fabulous guests today. But every single month as we go through the year, we're going to look at that a little differently.
Excellent. Well said, Kelly. What a great way to tee up this session as we are about to enter the twilight zone of, I'm kidding. Great conversation.
Close, yeah.
Well, I think, kidding aside, I do believe the procurement profession and what it means today is a bit misunderstood. And maybe we can touch on that more here today, but got a great conversation teed up. Really excited about continuing our partnership together. Let's say hello to a few folks. One of our favorite parts of these live streams are our community that show up each and every time, and they bring it, Kelly, just like you, they bring it.
I would expect nothing less from the Supply Chain Now audience.
Pratique, hope this finds you well. Looking forward to your comments and commentary here today. Peter, I'll tell you, you've been on
Peter.
fire. Really appreciate what you've shared through these and on social. So keep it coming. Our dear friend in Arizona, Rhonda, great to have you, and keep the live stream and the podcast programming coming. Really have enjoyed that. Nikhil, great to have you via LinkedIn. Of course, Anna, a little sneak peek from the green room. Hello, Anna. Looking forward to your commentary. Juan, great to have you here via LinkedIn. Thanks so much for joining us. Huang, great to have you also via LinkedIn. Daria, hey, new year, new series, exciting. I agree. I'm a little bit partial, but
Me too.
Clay and Amanda are, as usual, are at the helm, making sure we're keeping things moving as we should. The doctor is in the house, Kelly.
Right. Thank you, Chris.
Chris Barnes, the supply chain doctor. He's looking forward to seeing what Anna shares here today. All right. So no further ado, we've got a ton of stuff to work through here today. I want to welcome in Kelly. Are you ready?
I am so ready.
Well, I skipped right over our programming note. Hey, really quick, if you enjoyed this live stream, be sure to check out Supply Chain Now, wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to check out Art of Procurement, which Kelly and Philip does a great job there. You can get any of those wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe for free, money back guarantee if you're unhappy.
Full refunds.
That's right. All right. With no further ado, let's bring in our featured guest here today, Anna McGovern, Chief Supply Chain Officer with Food Bank for New York City, and Kathy Fulton, Executive Director of the American Logistics Aid Network. Hey, good morning, Kathy and Anna. How are you doing?
Good morning, guys. Looking forward to being with you.
We are too. And Kelly, this is interesting. We've been after Anna for a while, and the pandemic threw us off, and the busiest, the just industry being busy kind of threw us off. It's great to have Anna finally join us.
Yes, it is.
And Kathy is a repeat guest, and she's been with us a couple of times. We're big fans of what her and her team are doing at Allen. Such a needed noble mission there. So it's great to have you both, and looking forward to diving right in.
All right. Let's go.
All right. And we are releasing the pre-show conversation as a separate podcast. So stay tuned. Stay tuned for that.
Good. Yeah. We promise it's not about supply chain.
Right. A little bit of Seinfeld.
Yeah.
A little bit of Seinfeld, a little bit of weather, a little bit of Bird TV, you name it. All right. So let's have a little fun before we get into the craft of procurement and the craft of the supply chain profession and talk leadership a bit. Let's have a little fun. Let's get to know you both a little bit better. So, Anna, I want to start with you. We're going to take you through our not so much lightning round. And we're going to start with, if we've had time kind of in quarantine and semi-quarantine, we probably have all been watching a little too much TV. We've certainly watched several of our favorite movies over and over here in the Luton household. But what's a go-to movie for you, Anna?
Well, that's funny that you mentioned TV and the pandemic. I didn't watch anything, up until the pandemic, and now I'm an addict to Hulu and Netflix and everything else. But honestly, the one that I always come back to is just one of my all-time favorites, and that's The Princess Bride.
Oh, Anna, it doesn't get any better than that.
It doesn't. That is my absolute favorite. I've gotten my kids into it. We sit there and, it's like, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father, prepare to die. So that's probably one of the all-time best movies that I always feel good about.
I love it. I'm with you. That's a great movie. We shared that with our kids not too long ago. Hey, couple quick comments. Sylvia Judy says, grit. And hello, Sylvia. Girls Raised in the South. New acronym for me. Welcome, Sylvia. And by the way, one of the things we were talking about in the pre-show was the setup. And Rhonda said she's loving all these home setups, visually fun. And now she's looking forward to listening. So, hey, folks, take notice of what's behind you, right? Like we're talking about. All right. So, Kathy, same question to you. Simple question, hard-hitting news here. What's been one of your favorite movies?
So I had a little bit of shock on my face when Anna said that, because that's absolutely my favorite movie as well, Princess Bride. And I'll go one further with the Inigo Montoya comment. And I've told everybody several times over the past year that everybody knows what supply chain what supply chain is now. They know how to spell it, but I'm not sure that they really know what it means. So, you can take the Inigo Montoya quote, you killed my father, prepare to die. But, you keep saying that word. I don't think I think that means what you think it means.
That's right. That's right.
I think you make a great point in a variety of different levels, Kathy, because the lingo of supply chain and truly understanding what that is, it can be such a barrier between organizations and between different sectors. Yeah. Certainly as between the military and the private sector, we've seen that be a big challenge. But I love that. Lessons you can learn from Princess Bride, huh?
Supply chain lessons.
That's right.
All right, so let's move to second question. So both of y'all, so Anna, I know you're in New York City, and Kathy, I want to say you're down in Florida.
That's right.
Is that right?
That's
so,
right.
Kathy, let's stay with you. What part of Florida are you in, and what's your favorite part about where you live?
So I live in Central Florida, so close to Disney. But that is not my favorite thing about where I live. I think my favorite thing about where I live is that the high temperature for Anna today is my low temperature when I woke up this morning. So this time of year, the weather's absolutely just gorgeous. And I would have to say that's a very positive thing right now.
Love that. Florida is such a beautiful state. All right, same question for you, Anna. Up in New York City, one of the iconic cities of the world. What's your favorite part?
Well, I mean, you either love New York or you hate it. I actually work in New York, but I live in Connecticut, and that's where I am today. I'm actually in the home office in Connecticut. The great thing about being in Connecticut is, first of all, you get to enjoy the four seasons, and we are considered part of New England, but we're so close to New York City that I can work in New York City.
Yeah.
And, you get households that are, husband against wife, brother against brother, so in this household, this is who we cheer for. But then you will have households where they're, Red Sox against the Yankees and, within the household. So, I mean, Kelly knows what I'm talking about, I'm sure. But
Oh, yes.
but what I love, I just love the New England weather, but then again, the hustle and the bustle of the city. There's nothing more resilient than New York City.
Yeah.
It gets kicked all the time, but it keeps rising. It gets back up. So,
Anna, I love that, and I can't agree with you more. But the Yankees did ruin much of the '90s for me as a Braves fan. Just so you know. But that's okay. Hey, I'm just jealous. I'm just jealous.
So, Anna, don't feel bad if you don't get asked another question for that. That may have been it.
hey, baseball pitchers and catchers are going to be reporting just a few weeks out. So I want the shortest off
Headed
season.
your way, Kathy.
That's right.
Yes, I was going to say, I drove
right.
by, we have the Detroit, I live in Lakeland or around there. And so we have the Detroit Tigers. I drove by the stadium the other day and you can see the activity starting to pick up. So
awesome.
Very exciting.
Spring. I hope spring's eternal. Always
Yes.
reminds me of that. A couple comments here really quick before I pass the baton to you, Kelly. Naif, great to have you here via LinkedIn. Mervin, hello. He's busy watching Tom's podcast. Hey, Mervin, that's a great one. Hope this finds you well where you are in Ireland. Rob is tuned in via YouTube. I want to say we had a nice comment from Catherine McCleary. Love seeing strong women in procurement being represented today. I agree with you, Catherine. Let's see. Peter was chiming in on some of the favorite things. Love Outlander on Netflix. Season 5 was just released and all 12 episodes.
Gotta love a good binge.
Yeah.
Princess Bride is back in the house. Michael Schubert, you confusing that word. I love that. Let's see here. Big Show Bob Bova is with us. Connecticut born and raised. Great to have you here with us, Bob. Marie Hurst is with us. Great seafood and a lot of Connecticut fans.
Yeah.
And then finally, Gary Smith, who's up in your neck of the woods, Anna. The great Gary Smith. But the pizza in New York City. I agree with you, Gary. Great to have you. All right. So, Kelly, where are we going next?
So I think we're going to pivot from movies and pizza and baseball fights because we don't want to have to take this conversation outside. That wouldn't be a good precedent to set. Anna, let's talk a little bit about how you got to where you are. So I know you have a lot of executive corporate experience and you're currently with the Food Bank for New York, but you've also got an independent consulting practice. How did you end up making that transition from working traditional corporate to striking out on your own and opening your own consulting practice?
Yeah, it's one of these things where, I've known from a very early start in my career to follow the opportunities as they get presented, right? So I went from big corporate, I grew up working for Unilever for almost 23 years. I've spent at this point, 30 plus years. I've spent half of it in procurement, in strategic procurement. The other half in planning and logistics and in manufacturing. So I've really done all the lanes of the supply chain highway, and it really is an end-to-end, point of view that you need to have when you're a practitioner, whether you're in procurement or whether you're in other parts of the supply chain. You really need to look at it from order to cash and from source to pay. There's no other way to deliver the value more strategically. So how I pivoted, the opportunity presented itself, and I started doing some advisory work, and I would follow that. My procurement background, I've specialized in personal care, in home care quite a bit, a lot of packaging work, a lot of chemicals and ingredients work that I've done, and then people had problems. And I had potential solutions to their problems. And especially during COVID, the questions started a lot more frequently. I went into beauty for a couple of years after Unilever. And then when, I transitioned from that, honestly, the people were scared to hire. It's almost like we were paralyzed, in pulling the trigger. If people had open roles, they didn't fill them. And so people still had problems to be solved. And I was getting calls from my network. And I said, I think it's time to pull the trigger full time on this thing. And
well,
honestly,
that's amazing.
Yeah, honestly, that's how I transitioned to the food bank after that. But, going to nonprofit, trying to solve the problems of food insecurity, I finally feel that I've come full circle. I'm finally living my best life and my best purpose. And so I can bring 30 years of supply chain training and experience to try and solve problems, because really here, failure means that if we don't deliver, somebody goes to bed hungry at night. And that's all the motivation we need to succeed, quite frankly.
And regardless of what sector you happen to work in, being someone that is viewed as a problem solver, I mean, there's all different kinds of problems, right? And it goes from we're out of the kind of packaging we need all the way down to, like you said, somebody might go to bed hungry tonight. And being somebody that can solve both of those is amazing. But being regarded as a problem solver, that's probably the greatest compliment that anybody can get.
Vanilla Ice would agree. Vanilla Ice would agree with you, Kelly, for sure.
Yeah, he definitely would. Otherwise, you end up with your projects hated and dated, and we cannot have that. So, Kathy, let me swing over to you really quick. And so I'm going to ask you about how you ended up in nonprofit, but one terminology thing you could help me with first. Is nonprofit and not-for-profit, are they interchangeable? Are they different things? Is nonprofit, that's like the appropriate word to use? Do you have a preference?
Yeah, I see them used interchangeably. I can't answer the semantics question for you, though. Honestly, let me grab the dictionary. Anna may have a weigh in on that, but I guess maybe one may be a legal term in that you've received your your certificate of nonprofit from the IRS. I don't know, honestly. But you asked about how did I get here, and I never had the advantage like Anna did of working for a truly big company. Worked for a mid-sized, now growing logistics services organization, Saddle Creek Logistics. I know that that you've talked to some of their folks before as well, and kind of got voluntold. There was, I was working in IT. There was a project that, Allen American Logistics Aid Network needed help with. And my boss said, hey, you need to assign somebody to do this. And I assigned someone, and they failed at it. And, to Anna's point, I recognized the importance of the work that was being done. I didn't want those people going to bed hungry or the disaster survivors to not get what they needed. And so, I jumped in, and, I guess it's almost 12, 13 years later, I'm still here. And having a lot of fun doing what I'm doing. So,
which is always good for how well things go, right, Scott? I mean, if you love what you're doing, there's nothing else that's going to drive you to perform more than that.
Yeah, great point, Kelly. And especially if you can love what you're doing and help so many people like both Kathy and Anna are doing, it's got to be a rewarding journey. So really quick, I know we're going to pivot over and talk about the craft, but really quick before we do, Kelly, I want to say we get this question a lot. And I want to offer Prabhu just a couple of quick pointers. Prabhu asked about, please guide people like me who are in the initial stage of supply chain management. We get this question each live stream. Just a couple of quick tips, Prabhu. First off, really invest in your network. Really use LinkedIn and connect with folks so that you can see what supply chain thought leaders and practitioners are talking about and sharing. There's so much great content there. Number two, check out the associations. There's a ton of global supply chain associations where you can not only connect with a great network, but connect with thought leadership and even invest in yourself and gain certifications. And then thirdly, there's a ton of free training. MIT is one organization, just one of many, that's offering some great courses, again, that you can add to your body, your understanding of how global supply chain works, and it'll help you move up along in your journey. So hopefully that helps, Prabhu. That's very practical from my experience. And of course, you'll pick up probably some additional thoughts as we wind our way through this conversation here.
Yeah.
All right. And then one other, Larry is with us here today. Larry, great to have you. I've really enjoyed all of the content you're putting on LinkedIn for sure, in procurement and otherwise. All right. So Kelly, where are we going next?
So now we go to the craft. So we've talked about the fact this is actually very unique. I think that we have two nonprofit procurement and or supply chain leaders with us. And so you've talked a little bit about how each of you got to where you are. But whether, Kathy, you said you worked for a mid-sized organization. Anna, obviously Unilever is enormous. Let's talk a little bit, starting with you, Kathy, about what you see as the differences and the similarities between a corporate environment, regardless of size, and a nonprofit environment.
Yeah. So, the similarity is there's still a customer to be served, right? You are still focused on providing a product or a service or something to a customer. I got called out on something this morning in an email because I had mentioned, doing the network design and all of that. And my partner said to me, "You're forgetting about the customer. You have to design for the customer first." Really that focus on the customer, focus on a service or a product, I think is the same regardless. The stakes are different. Whether someone's getting a widget delivered to them is a whole lot different than, like Anna said, if someone's getting to eat at night. But so, similarities are there. Differences are the pace. Our work is primarily focused around disaster response, getting things answered and moved out quickly, and the stakes. I think those are two of the primary differences. When you look at all of the metrics that we have across all of the disciplines within supply chain, speed, cost, all of those things, there is definitely a distinct difference between if you're doing it for profit or if you're doing it, from a nonprofit perspective.
And we talked about the fact that you're doing it from the heart, right? Like, especially in corporate, people have not necessarily chosen to join procurement. One of my favorite ways of putting that, this actually comes from Charles Dominic and Sohaila Lunny in their book that they wrote, The Procurement Game Plan. They said that procurement is like the island of misfit toys from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And it's where you send people if you don't ever want to see them again. So, that's the procurement of old, I like to think about it as, but the heart that you bring to work that you're doing when it's humanitarian, nonprofit, disaster response, that really must change everyone's motivation and drive to go above and beyond.
It really truly does, Kelly. People, like I said, we work in disaster, so people can tend to focus on the bad parts of that. We have dashboards that show how many people have died because of the pandemic. But I get to see, our organization gets to see the good that comes about because of it. We get to see the organizations like Anna's who are out there serving others. We get to see the businesses who have raised their hand and said, hey, we have a resource or we have an asset or we have a product that can help. And here we're going to give it to the folks who can really use it. So I think that, like you said, the heart, the passion that comes along with it. I hope that supply chain and procurement professionals are passionate about their jobs, because ultimately we are all trying to, live together on this planet.
Absolutely.
And, but there's just something a little more special about being able to serve others. Yesterday was MLK Day. We have, the National Day of Service on to recognize Dr. King. I'm one of those fortunate people that gets to serve 365 days a year. So very, very grateful to have that opportunity.
And to approach your work with gratitude. That's also a powerful perspective.
You have to be grateful for, when my daughter was little, she told people that mom begged for a living, but because, you're always asking people for something, right?
Yeah.
but it is that gratitude and just from living with an abundance mentality rather than a scarcity mentality. And that's what gets you through. Things go crazy around us all the time. But if you are focused on the positive, if you're focused on, the good that other people are doing, and you just remember that this is the long game, I think that all of those things really are very special about nonprofit work versus for-profit work.
Those are incredible thoughts. And, we're seeing some of the comments come in from the audience, and there's even folks within our listening audience right now whose lives have been positively impacted by nonprofits. So 100% agree with you. Abundance mindset, bringing the heart to your work. Yeah. Anna, same question to you. Going from an enormous global corporation, obviously and then you talked about working for some, the beauty business unit, right? Kind of narrowing things down, packaging. What do you see as the similarities and differences between corporate and nonprofit?
Well, to echo what Kathy says, it is a service, oriented business. So customer service is customer service. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing is that, the pace that Kathy talked about, we like to in supply chain think about, forecasting and planning and this and that, but a disaster hits, that goes out the window. Or you'll get a call, with USDA, saying I've got 15 truckloads of, grapes and oranges. Do you want to take them in? And, you need to be able to dispatch them within a week because they're going to go past their best buy date or whatever. You just have to be able to react, and you don't say no because you want to take that in so that you can get it to the right place. So the pace is significantly different. And the one thing that I will tell you is, you can always teach supply chain. You can always teach procurement. You can always teach, forecasting and planning. What you can't teach is heart and commitment and dedication. Yeah. And the people that work in nonprofits are doing this because they are committed to a cause. Yeah. It really is a purpose-driven environment. Not to say that you can't be purpose-driven in corporate. Mm-hmm. There is just a different set of dynamics that I'm really enjoying. And you do get up every single day feeling that sense of enormous purpose. Kathy put it perfectly. It's not like we get a couple of community days where we can go and volunteer. We're doing this every single day. And just that can-do attitude. So the pandemic shut everything down. We lost our volunteers. Companies couldn't take in volunteers but just being able to go where the need was. Okay, so we can't distribute food through normal channels. We're just going to erect a big tent in Yankee Stadium, and we're going to hand out bags of food to families who need them. So just that being able to react and move on a dime, that kind of agility doesn't always exist in big corporate environments. That's the big difference that I've seen so far. But other than that, the supply chain is the same. The same principles. You still have to get from point A to point B at the lowest cost and the quickest amount of time. So that part is exactly the same.
Love that. So we've got a ton of comments. I want to share just a few from our community, but really quick, Anna, I stole a press release from the food bank for New York City's website. And at least in early December, since the pandemic started, 77 million meals to New Yorkers in need. Wow. What an incredible.
Oh, it's much higher than that. It's much higher than that at this point.
Well,
so
thank you.
It's a tremendous amount. And it's a tremendous need out there. It's eye-opening.
Well, appreciate I can't say it enough. I love what you and your respective teams are doing. It's wonderful to see the supply chain and procurement professions be highlighted in all sectors. And we're going to have to add a couple hours to today's show, I think. So let me share a couple of comments here. Victor is from tuned in via Dublin, via LinkedIn. Great to have you here. Sylvia disagrees a bit with an earlier comment. She sees she's got a lot of empathy and passion in the for-profit logistics side, which
good for you, Sylvia.
Completely get that. Completely get that. Let's see here. Rhonda mentions that she was a local disaster responder for the American Red Cross. Wonderful people, huge heart. Gary agreed with something Kathy shared earlier. Regardless of whether you're in the public or private sector, it's all about the customer. We need to stencil that on our right shoulders, I believe, everyone. Neil said, begging for a living. Really, though, begging is part of our negotiations toolkit.
That's in there.
That's right. Peter says, procurement is about changing how we have always done things and finding value in hard to spot opportunities. Excellent point there. And then finally, let's see here. Peter also says he's got to disagree with something Kevon said earlier. It's all about the collaboration because the customer is not always right. Interesting point, counterpoint there. All right, good stuff. We got to leave it there for now. Let's get back to talking about the craft. So this has been an interesting, this word, the craft. I think it started with the conversation, at least from our end. I picked up on a conversation Greg had with a member of supply chain tech platform. And it really, the more I thought about it, it's such a great word to use about procurement or supply chain or really, logistics, you name it, because there's so much a mixture of formal education, but everything you pick up along the way that allows you to add this seasoning here and that seasoning there. But what it also denotes, maybe to many, is when you think of craft, you think of, at least I think of something slowing down to make sure you get it all right. Anything but speed. So, Kathy, I want to start with you here. What is one thing when it comes to procurement or supply chain or you name it that you really wish you could slow down and get it right so that we could move faster, maybe in the bigger picture?
Yeah, and I one of your guests hit it on the head when they said collaboration. For us, you don't have time once a disaster occurs to really build strong partnerships. And that's so key to everything that we do, is knowing who has the resources, who needs the resources. I wish that I had infinite amount of time to really explore those partnerships, explore that collaborative nature of everything that we do. It's in the collaboration that the magic happens. And so when we're getting those partnerships right, when we're getting, just the conversations around it, when we're building that community, things go better. I think it may have been in our pre-conversation or even earlier talking about resilience in New York and New York City being a very resilient community. It is because people are willing to put aside their differences. It's because they're willing to, Yankees or Red Sox aside, but they're willing to have difficult conversations. And that's the piece that I wish, we just had time to expand on is let's look at our commonalities. Let's figure out how we can serve everyone's interest, how we can get, the things to people who need them. So, yeah.
One thing I think about when you shared there that you can't build those relationships right when you need them is one of my favorite quotes from Chris Barnes, who's in the community, and it comes from Harvey McKay, who wrote this great book, great title, Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. And longly, that has stuck with me for so long, right? Because it is about, I think, the long game, as you put it, Kathy. It's not about the here and now. And that's what really makes for successful, effective collaboration, at least in my book.
Yeah.
All right, same question.
And I'll just add one thing to that, Scott, is, the dig your well before you need it. We also say, plans are useless. Planning is essential, which is an old Eisenhower quote or attributed to him. But it really has to do with not just the relationships, not just a formal structure, but that comfort with one another to know, hey, if I need a procurement professional, I know that I can call Kelly. I know that I can call Anna. It's knowing capabilities so that in the heat of the moment, when you have to make those quick decisions, when you don't have time to slow down, you've already built your toolkit, you've dug your well, you've created those plans.
Love that, Anna. It's like the little pig that that uses bricks, right? He is prepared, ready for whatever comes. All right. I'll tell you, it's interesting where we're drawing analogies from here today. All right, so, Anna, same question. What would you like to slow down so you really get it right and can go faster in a bigger picture?
Right. So, it's really important to really assess the situation. You just need to assess what is the problem. Make sure that you understand what the various options are. And honestly, it really is about the network. Whether you're in corporate supply chain, in corporate procurement, whether you're in not-profit, non-for-profit, it really is about knowing where to go for information. Okay. I always said, I'm smart enough to know I'm not that smart. Okay. What are my key strengths? My superpower is I know who to go to ask a question and get an answer. Right. So it really is about knowing who to turn to get the information and then tapping into those that can get you that answer. So if you stop long enough, and slow down to understand what the real question is, because sometimes it's not the first question you ask. Sometimes you have to ask why 5 times before you get to the real root cause of the real problem statement you're trying to solve. So what is the real problem? And then figure out what you need to do again. Understand the true root cause of the issue you're trying to solve. I would say that's what I'd like to see people slow down to figure out, because that'll solve a lot of issues down the road.
Yeah.
Anna was so well spoken, and now you've reminded me what I forgot to share to an internship type class. I had on my notes 5 whys. It's such a beautiful, simple lesson, life lesson learned. So thank you for pointing out my deficiencies, Anna. What I forgot to share. Let's talk about, and I'll stick with you for a minute, because we talked about pre-show. We're all too close to things, regardless of where you are, what your role is. We can all be way too close to things. Even when we think we're being strategic, there's something right up under our nose, right? So Anna, as a change agent, as a consultant, but also as a chief supply chain officer, what stands out to you when we talk about getting too close? And is there a certain recurring problem, or what's general observation about people and practitioners getting too close to issues?
And I think this applies generically across the board, whether you're working in food banking or disaster relief or, big corporate, anywhere. For me, the thing that I've realized is when people get too close, they can't see the forest through the trees. Sometimes you just have to climb up into that helicopter and hover to see where the fire is. Because if you're so busy putting out one fire, the rest of the forest could be burning down and you don't know it. What I also find out is that, people don't bring in, especially since we're dialing P for procurement, it doesn't have to be invented here, right? So the supplier is a tremendous source of innovation creation. Bring in the supplier at the early onset. Bring them in that early ideation phase, so that you don't come up with something that's really glitzy and beautiful, but then you find out later on down the road that it's not fit for manufacture or fit for purpose, so you can't execute it. It really helps speed to market when you can incorporate your supplier partners, all of them, early on in the process. And, if I highlight, going back 30 years of a supply chain career, whether I was in procurement or not, every single one of my career highlights included a supplier solving a problem and helping us reach success. Mm-hmm. So this is, I think, the advice I would give in terms of getting too close to it. Sometimes you just have to go and bring the outside in. It's just step back. What are others doing? You can bring in a supplier. If you're trying to create a new soap, or a new body wash, a supplier who's like a Dow, as an example, they supply water filtration, they supply paint coatings, they were supplying so many other industries, pharmaceuticals, and so on. You can borrow from other industries, and that's the beauty of bringing the outside in.
Yep. Excellent. So much there. We got to keep driving. There's so much there Annie just shared. I'd love to dive a little deeper on. We've got some questions from the audience. Kelly, I know we're gonna kind of take it in a different direction with what lies ahead in just a moment.
Yes.
Let me share a couple of things based on what we're hearing both from Kathy and from Anna. Peter shares that he had an urgent startup a couple of years ago flying to Japan out of Montreal. He made one call to a trusted supplier, and we had it up and running with competitive pricing in less than 4 weeks. And I think that really illustrates a couple of points you both are making, but that those investing in those trusted relationships proactively, and then bringing them in, to your point, Anna, so that they're part of the problem solving, part of the conversation.
Yeah.
If they're not part of the conversation, they're part of. They've got no idea what you're trying to tackle, right? And how they can help.
To Sylvia's point from earlier, that's a commercial situation where the supplier's working with heart on behalf of your organization. So absolutely an example of that.
Excellent point. Rhonda is trying not to be reactive. And she says blinders on. So, hey, some days we can probably all relate to that, where you've got to put blinders on, at least for a portion of the day. We've got a couple of questions here that we'll try to circle back to if we get a chance to. So let's pick back up on the conversation here at this point, Kelly, because we want to talk about 2021, right?
We do. And I think for those of us that have been in supply chain for a long time, that didn't discover the supply chain existed because there was no toilet paper, we think about it as something we focus on efficiency. We focus on streamlining, we focus on visibility. And I think all the work that we've done in those areas has really been around optimizing on certain factors. So if you think about all of the things that are now uncertain and all of the things that sort of our existing systems are pinned to, we assume we know demand. We assume we know timeframes. We assume we know where we can get supplies and services. Kathy, how are you guys and the team at Allen rethinking how you optimize, what you optimize on, what you feel like you still have some amount of certainty around, and where you're trying to build in some flexibility to get through 2021?
Yeah, there's no certainty in disasters. The only thing
except that they'll happen.
Exactly, that's the only certain thing, is that we're going to have them. So really, we were very fortunate to be able to bring on a couple of part-time staff towards the end of last year, people who actually have logistics and supply chain in their background, rather than me with the IT kind of vision. And so it's really nice to be able to now go back and say, okay, what a crazy year we've just been through. What worked really well, what didn't. So how do we take the lessons from 2020 and move them ahead to 2021 and beyond? Again, with a customer focus, so that we know that nourishment and hydration and medical care is reaching the people who need it. But it's really about learning those lessons. It's looking at the historical, while recognizing that our partners that we work with on the commercial side have just upended everything about their processes in 2020. And so being able to, take advantage of the changes that they've made, the advances that they've made to really serve and support our community.
And Anna, what do you think on that same point? What do you feel like I'll say no. What do you feel like What is likely? What are you at this point trying to optimize on, and sort of where are the variables that you have working in your situation at the Food Bank for New York?
Well, so I think I'll answer that both from a food banking perspective as well as a everyday consumer packaged goods perspective, because I think they're two separate things. The one thing that we've learned is that when disaster hits, there are new people, there are new customers or clients that discover the resource is there. Mm-hmm. And so you never get back to the baseline. So if your baseline is, call it 80 million meals, and now because of a disaster or because of Harvey or hurricane, pandemic, all of a sudden your new baseline is, let's call it 120. You will not get back to 80, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to prepare for a new baseline. It's not going to be 120, but it's not going to be 80. So maybe you anchor on a forecast plan, that pins you at 100.
Yeah.
I think that's what you have to be aware of. And what do you need to do to accommodate additional people, right? And how do you get to where the need really is? Okay, so we're trying to serve the 5 boroughs. All of our sister food banks are trying to serve their community, and we all know this. But I think on a corporate level, this has shaken up everything we know about supply chain.
Oh, yes.
Right? So for the last 2 decades plus, 20, 25 years, we've been all about low-cost supply chains. Low cost, low cost, low cost. As buyers, we've been about leveraging and increasing our buying power, bigger suppliers, fewer suppliers, consolidate.
Mhm.
And suddenly, all of a sudden, supply security is really the ticket. It's no longer about low cost. It's about supply security. So it's about, how do I secure supply, pay more, but potentially sacrifice my margin, but keep myself on shelf, right? So, and then react and pivot. So, react, pivot, agility, speed to market, all of these terms are now part of the vernacular. And it really is about supplier diversification, right? It's about supplier capacity, right? And capability for them to react. So that's a new thing going on, right? And of course, it's upended the supply chain. King Arthur flour, for example, had a 600% spike in demand, right? And so they had to quickly pivot from 50-pound bags of industrial flour that was no longer needed because restaurants are not open, and suddenly everybody is baking bread at home, right? So they needed to pivot to 5 and 10-pound bags. So that's the sort of thing. It's like, how do you pivot quickly? And then how do you secure the supply by going to more? Yeah. And now this gets you the foot in the door. So if you are a mid-size or a small supplier who can only dream of getting into a Procter & Gamble or maybe, a Pfizer or any other big conglomerate, suddenly you've got an opportunity to get your foot in the door because you can respond. And then how do you respond? It's all about the customer. Listening and understanding what is that need, and then being able to react with speed to fulfill that need.
If I can interject just for a second, Anna, so much good stuff there. Dr. Werakat, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. I think Anna just speaking to some of those things that change, especially as a result of the pandemic. So this is an excellent question, though, because part of the silver lining, I would argue, and there's good news if you really look for it. There's a ton of heartburn and loss, and we all are familiar with what the pandemic has done. But there's silver linings because it is going to make, the resilience word came up earlier. We like to think about it in terms of just how fragile you are, because it kind of changes that conversation. But there's going to be so many great learnings that provide that surety of supply, Anna, that you're speaking to. And it's going to make it, it's going to make us a lot stronger. So excellent question. And we'll try to touch on that more. Dr. Werekat, thanks for joining us here via LinkedIn. All right. So I think, Kelly, picking back up, I think we're posing 2021 to Kathy as well, right?
Yeah. So we had talked a little bit about what Kathy was going to do to re-optimize. So let me sort of ask you my last question, Kathy and Anna, and then I know we're going to hear a little bit about the work going on at Allen. Semi-lightning round. Kathy, is there a solid line between procurement and supply chain? Is it a blurry line? Do we need to blur a line that's there by smudging it up a little bit? How do you, for folks that are maybe supply chain people tuning in here, or procurement people that have followed me over to supply chain now, where do you see the line between procurement and supply chain?
You have to be really good friends, and, as much as I'm not a supply chain person, I'm even less a procurement person. So I'm really enjoying how much this has made me, the past year has made me think about the importance of getting the supply base right, doing procurement the right way. So you've got to be joined at the hip. I saw some research that I think Scott posted or someone posted earlier today about, the rise of procurement officers climbing up the ranks. And I think that that's so important, you can't serve your customers if it's not there, right? I'd seen a quote in someone's warehouse one time that said, the customer is always right, or something like that. Customer comes first, and I've already seen that come by the comments that they're not. Focus on the customer, but you really have to focus on the supplier. Without procurement, without the right suppliers, you can't get anything to your customers. For us, that's super important. For Anna and the Food Bank for New York City, it's life or death.
No, that's so true. And Kathy, you could not have said that any better if you were in procurement and supply chain. So perfect answer. Anna, same to you. What do you think about the lack thereof or line between procurement and supply chain?
So look, it's not really a blurred line. It really is about the value chain. We are business managers, right? So in fact, I have an article that I wrote for LinkedIn not that long ago, where I was arguing the CPO should be reporting to the CEO. Yeah. Most of the time, supply chains, you've got CPOs reporting to the chief supply chain officer. But when you think about our spends, 50% of everything we cut a check for is not necessarily supply chain. You look at marketing spend, you look at IT spend, HR spend, you've got significant value. Okay. So you can't, the supply chain is defined as plan, source, make, and deliver and return. So it is part of the supply chain. There's no question, but I'd like to think of it as we're all part of the value chain, delivering value. Suppliers grow the top line. Yeah. It's not about cost savings, just growing the bottom line. So they need to work hand in hand. Okay. But I think we've seen the rise of procurement with a seat at the table at the board, and they've earned that, right? Because procurement professionals and the skills that are required, it's about negotiation. It's about being a financial wizard. It's about knowing legal and compliance. It's about being a coach and a mentor to your suppliers. There's such an inherent business requirement now. The skill set has expanded, and they're both equally important, and they both deserve to report to the CEO of any enterprise. So that's the way I look at it. It's really not about, is it blurred? It's part of the overall value chain.
Well, as we knew, this segment of the conversation is generating a lot of comments from the community. But Anna, a lot of it is saying hallelujah to your point, especially with the CPO reporting directly to the CEO. And Kathy, back on what you shared really quick, that was a great article from Supply Chain Dive, which is one of our favorite publications. It ranked all the growth of the various relatively new C-level positions. Chief Diversity Officer was number one, far and away, which didn't surprise me. That's great to see, really, frankly, especially with those that really get it right and invest in that. But the Chief Procurement Officer was 11th on the list, and that really surprised me. But what's in a name, right? As long as they really get procurement strategy right, and they really can integrate that into the overall supply chain organization. And to your point, Anna, it's represented in the C-suite, right? That's some of the important things. It'd be great if we keep seeing the proliferation of Chief Procurement Officer, but we got to move up those rankings, don't we, Kelly?
Yes, we do. Absolutely, we do. And get to that CEO.
Right. So what we're going to talk next about, Kathy, I want to make sure we're talking about line, blurring the line. Anything else to add to the conversation? I appreciate, I love the transparency. You got a strong IT background. I'm sure you've been learning for years, drinking water from the fire hydrant, as the saying goes, when it comes to logistics and procurement and supply chain. Anything else to add about the blurring of lines, especially from a technology guru?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't even say I'm a technology guru anymore. That was a long time ago. But we have to be specialists, but also generalists. We have to understand that, the collaboration has to happen not just external to our organizations, but internally as well. We have to understand, like Anna said, the whole value chain and our role in it. So.
Yeah, great point there. I want to share a couple quick comments, Kelly, if I can, before we make sure folks know a couple of big things that the Allen Group is up to. I know we're right up against the time limit here. Gary says, it continues to amaze me that procurement and supply chain see themselves as different. They are two sides of the same coin, Gary says. It needs to be a single organization in most organizations, public or private. Good stuff there from Gary. I think I shared this one earlier. Catherine says, you nailed it, Anna. We've got a bunch of t-shirts ready to go here. Peter says, let's see here. Long story, just had what was called, well, I guess he had an interest interview, too long a story to add here, but suffice it to say, that was precisely what I promoted all into the CEO. I guess he's referencing an organization that did report into the CEO. Okay, good stuff there. The comments are fast and furious. All right, so as we start to wrap here, Kathy, really quick. I know Alan, both organizations represented here, ton of big initiatives, helping a ton of people. What's the big project at Allen that really has got your team's attention right now, Kathy?
Yeah. Well, like most people, just really paying close attention to the vaccine supply chain, and figuring out, we have no official role in supporting all of that, because of the way that it's set up, but really helping our business partners have access to information about that. I think that there are real opportunities for businesses to participate in vaccination efforts with their staff. Always have our supply chain intelligence center up with the map on weather activities and COVID related activities. And then, one of the great things that has happened just, in the past couple of days, getting to meet Anna, she and I are going to sit down and have a conversation about, we work with food banks already. That's awesome. Are there things that we can be doing collaboratively? So,
I love that. That's great to hear. Y'all got to report back and let us know the cool things you ought to be doing.
Yeah. Maybe you could watch the movie together, and then you could start talking about the supply chain food bank stuff.
Oh boy! All right. So really quick, Anna, just really quick. I know that there's no shortage of things that your organization's doing. Is there one thing in particular that you really have enjoyed, being a part of, or helping plan or execute?
Yeah, it's really how to manage the inflow of product, right? So we've got 45% more food that we need to get out to our clients, and honestly, it's about building that resiliency in our supply chain. I've got some key open roles, in logistics, in transportation, in inventory management. So please link up with me. We're hiring. And we're growing, we're growing based on a need. So, even President-elect Biden is allocating more money towards food banks, as I'm sure Kathy knows, as part of Rescue America package. Yep. And, we're preparing and gearing up for that. So it's been quite a ride. I've really enjoyed it so far.
I bet. And I love, the continued, onboarding of supply chain experts, leaders, practitioners, been there, done that, into sectors outside of maybe the main thrust of traditional supply chain, if that makes sense. So I love it. Brings so much to organization, and unfortunately there is such a great need. So Anna, I really appreciate what you do. Now, Anna and Kathy, I know we've got your LinkedIn profiles in the show notes, right? So folks hopefully can connect with you that way. We've got your organizational websites there as well, so that folks, y'all can find that via the LinkedIn, YouTube, or the Facebook notes. Anna, how else can folks connect with you directly?
They can find me at foodbanknyc.org, and they can connect with me on LinkedIn. I do check LinkedIn regularly, so happy to connect.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Anna. Same question to you, Kathy. What's the easiest way for folks to connect with you?
Yeah, we get a lot of requests or a lot of offers of support, and our website, allenaid.org, is the absolute best way to find me, find our organization, help us help others.
Well put there. And I think that goes to both of your organizations. I love that. We're big fans of what you both do here. Thanks so much for taking an hour out. Kelly, what a rock and roll conversation. It was tough to keep up, and I'm used to this, Kelly.
I know. Oh my gosh. And I love the fact that we've connected you guys. I think that's probably my biggest sort of glowing takeaway from having both of you on, not only together, but for the first episode. I'm thrilled about that.
Yeah.
Agreed. All right. Well, big thanks to Anna McGovern, Chief Supply Chain Officer with Food Bank for New York City, and Kathy Fulton, Executive Director with the American Logistics Aid Network. We hope to reconnect with you soon. Thanks so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Isn't that? Whoa.
Surprise!
We've got a little glitch in the control room there, Kelly. You never know with live streams. That's why they're live streams.
You don't, but we can handle it.
That's right. Well, what a outstanding conversation with Anna and Kathy. I don't know about you, but I've got my 17 pages and then some of notes. So
I know.
You share first, though. What's a couple of really key things that both Anna and Kathy shared before we wrap up here?
Yeah. So I think in terms of what Kathy shared, I love this idea that everybody has a customer that needs to be served. And I think that's important because we all have to understand who the customer is or who all the different groups are. But I also think it's an important reminder that in nonprofit, you have to think about the people depending on you and utilizing your services as customers, or the effort truthfully will fail. And from Anna, I love this thought of before you get down to the business of solving, make sure you're looking at the right problem. Explore it, ask why 10, 15 times if you have to, but really focus in on the core problem, not a symptom, so that all of your investments in solving that issue will go where you need them to go.
Agreed. And if you want to be the most popular person in the meeting, make sure you ask why 10 to 15 times, right?
Everybody loves that. Yeah. Especially when you're getting to the end of the meeting, people love that.
Of course, I'm kidding, but that five why is such a powerful approach, getting that root cause. And there's a great scene in the movie Moneyball, since we're talking baseball earlier, Kelly. Have you seen Moneyball?
I've not seen it. I know of it, but I've not seen it.
Oh, Kelly, you got to check it out. There's a wonderful.
I'm going to add that to my to-do list.
Yes, there's a wonderful, in this metrification moment we're in. It's a great testimony to a different way of leading a very traditional industry, which is baseball, right?
Yeah.
And there's a moment where Brad Pitt, who is GM of the Oakland Athletics, and he's playing Billy Beane. He's got all of his key brilliant minds around the table, and he's like, "What problem are we trying to solve?" And all the answers come back, and they're not the problem. And it's such a great scene that's so universally relevant. So check out Moneyball. To our community members, y'all make sure you check that out. But I had so many great notes. I love what we wrapped on with Kathy and Anna. Help us help others. That's what they're both doing. Gosh, Anna, the supplier diversification, the course of 5 whys, bringing ideas outside in. That has been a mantra here in recent weeks. Bring those suppliers in early.
That's
don't
right.
wait.
And listen to them.
Yeah, don't wait till the last minute when things are burning down. Get out ahead and see how we can avoid even going down certain paths. And I think Kathy talked about it, and they both spoke to it. That design for customer, and the customer is a huge part.
That's so important.
You just mentioned listening, listening to your suppliers, but also listening to your customers, and really not fooling yourself with what both communities are telling you. So I had a great time. I think, Kelly, I might've gotten caught up with where we're going here and next, because I was between the active community we had, a lot of comments there, and trying to take some of my key notes down so I could share. This was a wonderful, wonderful starting point for our Dial P for Procurement series, right?
I absolutely agree. And I was thrilled too. I love seeing all the comments. I love the fact that I know a bunch of the folks that have joined us. I'm grateful, obviously, to Anna and Kathy for giving us their hour, but I'm also grateful to everybody in the audience that did the same. It's monthly, so you get to do it again in 4 weeks.
That's right. Well, hey, to that end, check us out third Tuesday of each month, 12 noon Eastern time, all things procurement, especially with a lot from the C-suite, which is wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful, great to see procurement and supply chain represented in the C-suite. Long time coming, and it's great to see a lot more and more and more of it. So, Kelly Barner, a pleasure. Let's make sure folks can connect with you before we sign off here. What's the easiest way?
Definitely LinkedIn. You can either visit buyersmeetingpoint.com or just simply Kelly Barner on LinkedIn. And if you see a lot of red, you'll know that's me.
It's the new theme and the background here.
Theme first.
All right. Well, hey, everybody, thanks so much for joining us. Huge thanks to Kathy Fulton and Anna McGovern. Man, that's at a high bar as we kick off this series. But stay tuned. We're working on some additional great guests that you're going to want to not miss as part of this Dial P for Procurement series. Big thanks to Kelly Barner and the Buyers Meeting Point team. Be sure to check out Art of Procurement. They do a lot of, I think they celebrated at their 300th episode a month or two back. So wonderful stuff there. From our team to yours, as always, especially here on the heels of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We had a special time these last couple of days, really reconnecting and reacquainting ourselves with Dr. King's incredible journey and Coretta Scott King's incredible role as well in all the wonderful work that family has done in the civil rights movement. But hey, on that note, do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.